Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Creative Confidence Podcast. I'm Suzanne Gibbs Howard. I'm so happy to have this amazing community here with us today. I always have conversations with special guests about creativity, leadership, innovation, and growth. And today, my special guest is Isabela Sa Glaister. She is a senior director of product development at IDEO U, and she is here to talk to us about creativity, leadership, and how to get the most learning out of a sprint. I can already tell this community is fired up. People were introducing themselves, but I invite you, if you haven't yet, to introduce yourself and where you are today. I can see we have a lot of people from Brazil in the house, which is good because that's where Isabela is originally from. Also, folks from Hawaii, Peru, Germany, Denmark, South Africa. We've got great representation. So thank you all for joining us here today. Let me tell you a little bit about Isabela. She is currently at IDEO U directing new product development, but she has a rich experience and a foundation in human-centered product design and research. She is deep in the space of user experience and product strategy. She spent 12 years at IDEO itself, where she led a lot of digital product development, especially in the learning space. Two of her favorites that I know are incredibly valuable experiences. She designed an app that helped first-generation college students stick with college all the way through, providing coaching as well as financial and career counseling. On a completely different end of the spectrum, she's also designed a gaming experience for children who have difficulties in learning. And it had these really magical characters inside, and it helped children to learn through both music and mischief. So really wide-ranging experience. And what Isabela is here to talk with us about today is how she's brought all of that together to design a new product experience for IDEO U. Outside of work, she spends a lot of time on her favorite project, which is answering her son's innumerable why questions. So welcome, Isabela. So happy you're here.
Thank you.
Today, together, Isabela and I are going to talk about what are sprints. Who are they best for? What are they good for? What are the benefits? Also, what are some of the most common challenges? Isabela has some of her favorite tips for facilitators in a sprint process to get a lot of creativity out of their team. And we'll be sharing a little taster of that new sprint experience. But one more thing before we start the conversation with Isabela, I just wanted to warm this community up with a question. So I want you to think about an experience that you've had in a meeting in the last week or so, where it didn't just go perfectly. Something was getting in the way of progress. What are some of the things that get in the way of progress for you? Technology, I see that from Kyle. I know some of the things I think about: managers, bureaucracy, my attitude. Actually, death by consensus, ego. Oh my God. Wow. Amazing. Too many meetings, not effective meetings, facilitators rambling on, paralysis in decision-making. All of these things come into play. Thank you for sharing. Isabela, I know you have spent an incredible journey and length of time thinking about how we can all radically improve the meeting while being collaborative, inclusive, and also helping people learn new skills all at the same time. I'd love for you to share a little bit about what got you interested in this challenge.
At IDEO U, we're always thinking of good, better, innovative ways to learn. And we know that when it comes to learning, especially in the context of work will take priority. And yet, learning is so much better when you learn with your team, when you learn with other people, and when you get to apply it. So we took on that challenge of figuring out how can we build an experience where you get to learn new ways of working, and that's a byproduct of tackling your hardest challenges.
I love it. So the learning, it's not a learning product, but learning is the byproduct of coming through this experience. So you get the double whammy of getting your toughest problems challenged or worked on while building new skills. That is super cool. I know you've anchored a lot of this experience in a sprint. And so before we dive into talking about sprints for a lot of this time, I just wanted to get a sense of how much the folks listening in today, how familiar they are with sprints. So we've got a little poll we just want to pop up and just have people give us a sense of where you are in your knowledge. And while we do that, Isabel, I have another question for you. I know you've been building this new experience, IDEO U sprints, over the last 2 years. And a lot of other things have been going on in the world these last 2 years, right? We've had a global pandemic that had a massive effect on the workforce, pushing a lot of organizations, teams to work remotely or in a hybrid manner. We've also had a racial reckoning, which elevated a new level of consciousness for all sorts of people about what does true inclusion and belonging look and feel like, even in the space of a work meeting. So all of these things have been amplified. And now you've been designing a new experience. How did this affect your work?
A lot. The last 2 years really exacerbated a lot of the challenges that we were seeing before. For example, how do you go from abstract into something tangible in a very complex, very ambiguous challenge? And how do you do that remotely? That's very difficult. This context also raised awareness in a really good way to important things like, and that's expected of leaders more now, of how do you create an environment that is safe and inclusive for people to collaborate, how you enable people that you work with to show up in that way and really truly meaningfully collaborate and leverage the diversity of perspectives in the room. And I think for all of us, our priorities have shifted. So making time to learn is also something to negotiate. So we took all of that input to design this experience and enable people to learn the skills that enable you to tackle these and get through these struggles without having to step away from work to learn.
Yeah, I love that. We're in this moment where so much has changed. We're not going back to the old normal. We have to shift to the new normal. And so I feel like you've designed all of these new and better ways of working into this learning and work experience. Let's come back to the poll. Let's pop up the results. Okay. So we've got the majority of folks are in the know what they are, but have never tried one. So fantastic. I think that is perfect to know. Isabela, could you give us a little baseline to start from where, just define in your view, what is a sprint?
At its core, a sprint is a very focused, collaborative, and outcome-oriented way to work. The promise of sprint is that you can make really great progress and tangible progress on a challenge in a relatively short amount of time. Typically, and this is for Scrum sprints or design sprints, you are sprinting for any between 5 days to a month. And that's the whole focus of the team. The entire team is focused on that one thing. So that takes intentional preparation because you don't want that to go to waste. We find that the organizations that have a hard time sprinting is because that's hard to do. That's hard to carve out that amount of time and that focus, given everything else that teams and people are focusing on. So what we did, and that's how IDEO U sprints is different, is that we designed so that it's easy to schedule and you can easily integrate it into your work. And on top of that, we also added a layer of creative leadership skills coaching. So we are coaching the team leads on running a sprint because they have a critical role in making sure that the sprint is successful.
Nice. Okay. So some of the challenges, and we'll talk a little bit more about common challenges, is getting enough time from people. And so some of the things we've tried to decide with IDEO U sprints is how to fit that in to a more typical work environment where a lot of stuff is happening at once. I know a lot of people have tried sprints a few times. Sometimes they go, well, it's really hard because you're putting a lot on the line when you pull your entire team into a sprint-based process. You're asking a lot of them. And it can be a vulnerable way to put yourself out there as a leader. Isabel, could you share an example with everyone of a story when you were hosting a sprint, just to make it really tangible? And then we'll talk about some tips and best practices.
Recently, I was working with a large tech company with a team designing a product in the space of digital safety for families. So as you can imagine, for large organizations coming out with a product in that space, you're coming out with a point of view. So really high stakes is something that your audience really needs. And it connects and ties to all the other parts of the organizations, all the other products that the organization had. So imagine that very complex network of stakeholders to work on this. So we worked with the team lead to help her resolve some of the tricky dynamics. And the team really did a great job. They landed at a place where it was very different from the assumptions that they had when they started. And that's very common in sprints. You learn more, and that often forces you to reframe your challenge in many ways. And the team was really energized and really motivated. I think it really built their sense of commitment. And to me, I think that perhaps even more powerful than that is the level of alignment and commitment among all the stakeholders. I feel like the product is in a journey. It's going to morph, it's going to evolve until launch, but that alignment, I think, endures and really set things up for success.
Nice. Okay. I think that's great. And I love the point about this framing the question and then bringing a collaborative team through it can help you get to a different place than what might be the initial assumption. Thank you everyone already for the questions. And we are absolutely going to get to as many of them as possible. Before we go to open questions, I know, Isabella, you have been really participating in literally or observing thousands of sprints and capturing with the team best practices to facilitate. I know some people are wondering about keeping the energy up, keeping the focus going in the right direction. So let's share some of your favorite practices for being collaborative, being inclusive, and yet making progress toward a goal all at the same time.
This is something that is very easy to do. And I challenge everyone listening to do it today. Do it on your own, on your next meeting that you have today. It's all you need is a collaboration tool, and it doesn't have to be very sophisticated. It can be a Google Doc, and you also need a question. What is the question that you want to invite input on from the group that you're meeting, from your team? And it takes about 10 minutes, depending on how large your meeting is. So step number one, and before I said that, just to give you some context, it can be any project, anything. Imagine, Suze, you have a meeting where you're sharing a project plan, and your question is, how are we going to measure success? So you're going to pose that question to the team. And step one is invite folks to capture thoughts individually. Put 2 minutes on the timer. They're going to write their thoughts down. And then step two, you want to group similar thoughts. So I might say, Suze, can you share one of your thoughts or ideas? And you you share that. You can copy paste on a workspace that you're working on, and you might invite someone else, and by saying, does anyone else have a thought or an idea that build on what Sue's just shared? And like that, you're going to create a grouping. And that where step 3 comes in. You're going to identify the common theme and invite folks. What is the theme that we see here in this grouping? And you're going to write down that theme or pattern. And it's better when that's more than one word. You're really describing the point that all those thoughts are trying to say. And you're going to do 2 and 3 until you covered all the thoughts, you have all the groupings. And then step 4, which is choose your priorities by voting. Just ask folks to vote by dots or by putting a +1 sign on the theme that's more important. And that's a really easy way to start integrating some of that highly collaborative behaviors that we do on sprints. And again, the behaviors are: invite the team to capture thoughts individually, group similar thoughts, identify the common themes, and choose your priorities by voting. I feel like it works really well to help you listen to the variety of thoughts in the team. You get to listen to everyone, and you leverage that brain power in the room to start synthesizing and capturing the thoughts and the patterns and the high level ideas. Nice.
I think that is so great. So it's just capture, group, theme, vote. Simple steps. I know you're saying in the beginning or first time through, you might slow it down and take about 10 minutes. I have absolutely come to love this simple flow. And I used it just the other day in a meeting about a financial plan, just to ensure that I was hearing all of the different voices in the room. We also have some great comments about step 4, calling it power dotting, which is always fun. So thank you. And people are sharing lots of different tools. This can be done with Post-its. This can be done with a whiteboarding app. This can be done with a shared doc, all sorts of things. So thank you for sharing that. Now, across the sprints that you've observed, Isabela, what are some of the themes that you see about who should sprint?
We see, and it's very common to see, innovation teams, design teams, product teams. We've also seen marketing and ops, several ops teams working on internal challenges even. And increasingly what we're seeing is senior leaders sprinting around a really big strategic objective or a really big question, which makes a lot of sense because it's a highly collaborative and efficient way to crystallize potentially really big opportunities for the organization. And in general, any cross-functional challenge or team sprints are great for that.
Nice. All right. And then are there certain kinds of situations that you think are like moments in a project or a process that you think are most useful?
For clarity, when you really need to get to clarity, you have a very gnarly, complex, abstract question, and you want to really crystallize what's your focus here. It's great for alignment. I think I said this a few times before, but especially for cross-functional teams or teams that are not seeing or agreeing on the next steps on what the focus of what you're trying to do. Tangibility, it's great to make things tangible. You get to build things, you get to do things, and get to that make that progress, which is really important, and create momentum. Sometimes you just want to that collaboration energy, and perhaps get a team that are new to one another or that are having some dynamics, just give them a really meaty challenge and create that environment. I think sprints are great for that. And I think in general, just getting started on that challenge, on that question, on that project, it helps build momentum and build the energy of the team and get the team to rally around it.
Yeah. So that at a kickoff moment or a first team meeting, when you want to make sure that you start off on a note of collaboration and inclusivity, sprints can be fantastic. So thank you for that. I know, to be clear, IDEO U is not inventing the sprint, neither is IDEO. Many companies and organizations use them. There are many different formats. I want to give a big shout out to Google Ventures and Jake Knapp with his book on sprints. We're all huge fans. There's some questions about how do IDEO U sprints differ from some of these other sprint approaches?
Primarily, IDEO U sprints is a learning experience. So what you're doing, what we created is an experience that help you learn in a very effective way and in a way that sticks. Because you're one team lead once shared with us that my team got to do this and got to really experience the value of working this way together. So that's a great way for you to really practice these new behaviors and mindsets and have them stick. And in addition to that, this format of easily integrating into people's work. So we, in addition to coaching sessions for the team leads, in the sprints, we are also offering curated work sessions. So we design these work sessions so you're getting to do that with your team. So it makes it really easy to schedule as well. And the other thing is that we're working to build a variety of sprints, and they have a different focus, different uses for different parts of a project.
Nice. Okay. So there's really, I think the timing is such a tough element. I know there were some questions about, some sprints can be a couple of days. Some sprints can last a couple of weeks or even up to a month. How can you talk a little bit about how you've helped design a sprint that fits more effectively into the dominant format of work, which is not necessarily having people's full attention for at least a week on one singular problem?
That was a critical challenge. We really were thinking about how can this slipstreams into people's work when they're not able to focus. So what we did is in these work sessions, the way that we designed the work sessions for the teams, that they're time bound, they're very focused, and they're very output oriented, and the output built from one session to the other. So it doesn't matter what you do in between. You and your team are committing that total amount of time for the sprint, and you have these superpower work sessions, and then the team lead meets with a coach in between at different points in over the course of the sprint to adjust these any dynamics or anything that are getting in the way to great results and a great team. Great engagement by the team.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is they're like these supercharged, high power, potent work sessions. And then the leader also gets some extra oomph to build that process in the spaces in between. But it's like a drum beat across an amount of time. Very cool. What are some of the most common mistakes or watch-outs that you would like to make people aware of?
What we see most often is starting with a solution or staying attached to the solution throughout the sprint. I feel like sprints really help you question the question, really reframe the challenge. That happens a lot. And sometimes that opening, when you open the realm of possibilities like that, it can be unsettling for the team, and the team might choose not to go there. So that's a challenge. I've also seen when you don't have the right people in the room, when you don't involve the right people. And by that, I mean, who has skin in the game in that challenge? Who bears some responsibility for the outcome of that sprint and moving on with that challenge? And who has really valuable perspectives to add? So thinking about the team, it's very important to make sure that you get somewhere interesting at the end of the sprint. And I've also seen, and I think this one I'm totally guilty of, because my very first sprint, I totally did that. But as a team lead or as the sprint lead, you are more focused on the process than on the team and then on the content. So the team lead plays a really critical role. You're guiding the team, you're guiding the content, and it's such a rich opportunity for you to develop and practice some creative leadership skills. So why waste it?
Yeah. Yeah. I know we have a couple more questions about roles, but I want to hear you talk a little bit more about that double-headed role of the team leader, that the team leader is best, and the sprint gets the best outcomes when the team leader isn't just a process facilitator and isn't just a content person, that you need both of those things. And that's one of the facets of true creative leadership, is that you're driving forward that process with concrete steps and bold leaps and all those things. Can you talk a little bit more about the coaching that the leader gets? And then we'll jump to questions. So people, please keep on sharing.
Yeah. In sprints, we see the team leads more than facilitators. They have a lot of responsibility over the outcome and how the team is engaging and how that's changing the way they work. So we do coach team leads through these one-on-one coaching sessions, which is focused on, for you and for your team, what might be the things that are getting in the way, and how do we create a plan. So the coaches work with the team lead on identifying the things getting in the way and creating a plan on how to address it. And we mapped out the creative leadership skills that you need. So for example, one of such skills is aligning on input. You know that that's an issue for you and your team when the output of the team, say, represents the strongest voices in the room, or the output of the team is a compromise. It's really the least contentious answer or direction. What you really want is to make sure that the output is an elevated synthesis of everyone's ideas. So through coaching, you might work, for example, on noticing when this is happening, and what are different tactics that you can use to ensure that you get to that elevated synthesis, that elevated level of an output where the magic really is.
Nice. I think that's so great. And I know a lot of people have questions about, when does a sprint format not work and not deliver the expected value? And I think what you're saying is a lot of that comes down to the person leading it. And it's a huge opportunity for that person to figure out how to not just respond to a limited few voices that often have the power in the room, and also not just have the lowest common denominator for a solution, but like, how do you get the best possible outcomes?
It really is a great opportunity to practice and learn your leadership skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's jump to some questions. I know we've got a great one from Selma, and she is asking, can design sprints be used to improve processes, or is it just for products? Other people are asking about sprinting in the consulting world. What if your product is just a slide deck? Is it meaningful to use a sprint? So what are the range of tangible outcomes that you might see sprints working for?
We've certainly seen people using sprints to design internal processes. We've worked with operations teams, and we worked with senior leaders on designing their strategy and the strategy planning process. So you can absolutely use a sprint to think through these elements, through challenges like that. And the possibility is really endless. I feel like what is most important is to have that challenge space really clear for everyone, and to have the right people in the room, and people who are really, like I said, have skin in the game and have a responsibility over that. And it's important for the challenge to be consequential, to be meaningful. You don't want to use a sprint just to practice. You really need that motivation of that big question that you're trying to crack to make the sprint successful.
Yeah, I remember you sharing with me once that a lot of organizations teach the sprint process through something that's not a big, meaty challenge. And I get that there are lots of good reasons to do that, to help people just learn the process. But in this, you're actually learning new skills and tackling a tough, meaty challenge that needs, so that you start to feel the complexity and all of that. I think also with processes versus products, I know you've talked a lot about the tangibility of outcomes. So even if it's just making a slide deck, that's tangible enough, or making a presentation, that's tangible enough. And so that can help with giving a concrete objective for a sprint to work toward. But some more questions we have here are about getting the team on board, convincing teams to adopt sprints, and also getting them set up in flow so that the success will be the outcome. Any tips or tricks there? Even Gemma's saying, I got one starting tomorrow. Any tips?
Wow. We really, the way that we prepare the team lead and prepare the team. So we have a moment where we kick off, and I feel like what you really need to do in these moments is make sure that what you're working on is clear. It's clear to everyone why it's important, and why we're doing this, you're basically telling them how I want you to show up and what I want you to contribute. And in these work sessions, there are ways that you can, there are creative warm-ups, there are ways that you can get the right energy in the room. And other than that, there are different dynamics that coaching can also help. There are things, like I said, around aligning on output. There are things around creating a better environment for people to feel like they can contribute something and make sure that they feel heard. And what we heard before from team leads is when you get to that point, and it's not that hard, but when you get to that point, the team feels like they helped in making big decisions. They were heard, they were involved, they had an input in directions that you're setting along the sprint, and things like that happen in the sprint that builds that commitment over time. So
yeah. Nice. What is like the smallest sprint activity that you feel like, is it just using some of the steps that you shared earlier in this call? But if you're trying to get a team or an organization comfortable enough to try a full-blown sprint, what are some of the things you might do to help convince them it's worth their time and get them comfortable with it?
I think those 4 steps are really great for that. So I can imagine one thing that you could do is, let's try something different right now. Or like, that's a big question that we've been trying to solve. We had several meetings and we haven't made good progress. Let's try this. And then play back to them. What we just did is a more sprint-like way to work. Why don't we use that? Why wouldn't we do this on a bigger question and take a little bit more time to crack that? And I think you that way you get people to have a taste of what it feels like to work in these ways.
Nice. What about doing sprints virtually? I know you're developing this over the last 2 years. So many people in knowledge jobs were moving to remote work. Any tips or tricks for when you're doing this in a remote context?
Yeah, we designed this during these 2 years of everyone trying to figure out how to work remote. So your choice of your collaboration space is really important. So we do use a digital whiteboard platform, and I feel like that really, really helps. And one thing that we did also that you can do is being mindful and intentional in the way that you create that workspace, because it becomes your room, your meeting room, your war room, or however you want to call that. And so I think for that space to have some personality, I think it can be fun as well. But the most important is that collaboration space, and does that enable you to do the work that you need to do? And I find that these digital whiteboard types of platforms are helpful for that.
Yeah, great. And sprints, design thinking. How do you see the relationship between those two things?
That's a great question. I think sprints, the way that we designed it, design thinking is a process and a mindset. And we borrowed, certainly we built on that, and we borrowed elements of design thinking, but sprints are a very specific, focused sequence of steps that you do to tackle a challenge. So a good way to look at it is sprint is it's a recipe, while design thinking is more of a mindset. But it's not that simple either. So you are doing things, you are putting your team in an environment where you're working through tensions, and you're really thinking and pushing the product, the thinking of the team. So the sprint kind of brings together these not just the methods, but also the how do we work together, how do we connect with one another to solve these challenges.
Yeah, I feel like it's maybe like the sprint, the design thinking mindsets are like the ingredients, and the sprint is one specific recipe. Yeah. And it feels like you're developing a couple different recipes for even different kinds of sprints. And that's scaffolding right. is there to help make this valuable process accessible to a greater variety of people and organizations.
And to push that analogy, is more like a cooking recipe, not a baking recipe, because it's not it's not meant to be stifling and precise.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. One more thing I wanted to ask about with the time of this, a lot of questions on that front. And so how long would you say the superpowered work sessions are that are designed as part of IDEO U sprints?
Can you repeat that? What do you mean by the
How
super power?
the when you have the little work sessions where people are coming together and they're sprinting, how long do those take?
They take between 60 to 90 minutes. And we do help you with the skills to keep the pace of the team and keep the momentum and moving on at the right time and making sure that you spend the necessary amount of time on the things that are really, really important. But it is really designed to fit into your schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one last question from our community. People are asking, what do you do when people won't commit to attending or to the time? How do you overcome that hurdle?
I think that goes back to the team. How do you shape the team? Do they feel like they have something to add? And do they have a valuable perspective that you need? And if those conditions are not in place, you need to work on that. But if these conditions are in place, I think you can just have a direct conversation, and perhaps there's something else that is getting in the way that you might not be aware of.
Yeah. I mean, I'm hearing there's so much that goes into the initial setup, the initial onboarding. And that's why there's so much coaching that goes on for the team lead to make sure that they have the tools to be able to respond in the moment. And that is true creative leadership. Those creative problems are not always the fun ones, but it's like, how do we get the right people in the room at the right time? All right. Well, I always get the last question. And what I would like to ask you is that I know you've been thinking so much about helping teams get unstuck. If you were to give tips to somebody who is feeling stuck in their work right now, what would you say?
I would say talk to an audience member, talk to a customer. It's really incredible what you can learn, and it's so simple to do as well. For the most part, I find that when I'm stuck or when my teams are stuck, what happens is we either lost track of what really matters, we lost touch with what really is important in what we're trying to do, or we exhausted what our thinking or where we can go with what we know right now.
Yeah.
So I feel like talking to customers or even talking to experts really help bring that fresh perspective and help you re-articulate the ultimate goal, the why you're doing this.
Nice. So get back to that why, get back to the real reason you're there. Lovely.
And the people you're designing for.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you, Isabela. Thank you so much to our community for all your questions and your time in joining us today. We've been talking with Isabela Sa Glaister about using sprints to work smart and upskill. What if you could solve your biggest work challenge and simultaneously learn new skills to boost your team's creativity, collaboration, and innovation? Our latest offer, IDEO U Sprints, combines collaborative work sessions with focused coaching to help teams tackle their toughest challenges. You can learn more at ideou.com/sprints. Check it out there. Thank you so much. And I will see you all soon.
Thank you.